Hello everybody, welcome back to Zero Views. If my voice sounds a bit off, it's because allergies and I don't know why these happen whenever I try to record these things. But anyway, let's start with RWBY Volume 4, Episode 2. It's cut into two sections this time. We're not just focusing on Ruby's group, we're focusing on Weiss as well. And I'm surprised that we're also focusing on Ruby's group because I thought Weiss was going to get a full episode to herself, and that might have been a bit boring. So I can see why they're doing that, but also because Ruby's group is the main active group at the moment. So Ruby's group goes to Xi'an in order to get an airship, only it's completely decimated. It's an interesting scene that I like to call back to Mulan for, because you know the scene where they're singing about what kind of girl they want, and then they get to the ruined village that completely kills the mood. It's more of a subtle mood killer, in that, you know, John starts talking about how he and his family would kind of go to Xi'an a bit, and they would, camp and do, a bunch of different stuff. And, Ruby and him are joking around as the area slowly gets darker and more gray, and, Ren and Norris, stop, and, they're all like, hey, guys, something's wrong. And it's, a more subtle, mood change, but still mood change nonetheless. And I kind of compare it to that. But anyway, basically, a wounded huntsman who died shortly after saying, what he said, he basically says that bandits attacked and Grim followed soon after with the panic. And we get some nice character for Ren and Nora here. Ren and Nora kind of get serious for a bit. Ren actually gets serious. He's been stoic and quiet, but we rarely see him, serious. And also, when they're leaving, Ren and Nora see a symbol on the ground. The two look at each other like they know who it belongs to. And later on, we see Ruby has been having nightmares of Pyrrha's voice. We actually find this before, like the first section where Ruby's group is going to Xi'an. We open up with that, and we see, what's it called? She's been having nightmares of Pyrrha, but we find out that it might be caused by a recording of Pyrrha that John uses in order to train. And it's kind of heartbreaking to, hear and see that, because, Pyrrha kind of, this is, before she could really get her feelings out, and, she kind of confesses, but in her own weird way, but John knows exactly what she's trying to do, now that everything's happened. And it's John's still grieving, but he's also trying to better himself and cope with it. I guess, him training to become better is his way of coping with it. So there's that. On Weiss's side, after the last episode where she was called to her father's study, which is apparently on the other side of the Schnee Manor, we get introduced to Weiss's brother, Whitley. Whitley sounds like Wheatley. That doesn't make me happy. And anyway, we find out that their mom is still around, but she's an avid drinker, because apparently she's in the garden right now drinking. And the way they make it sound is that she's an alcoholic, to be honest. So Whitley is a character I'm not sure on what to make of yet. Something tells me he's the stuck-up son, but, his demeanor in this episode really made it seem like there's something bigger going on in the Schnee family that he is aware of. I don't know. All I know is that I don't have good vibes coming from him. So, Weiss makes it to study, and we find out that Mr. Schnee's name is Jacques, even though, you'd think his name would be a W, like everyone else, but it kind of puts the Schnee family in an interesting light, especially because there's a picture of him that you can briefly see with not white hair, so makes you think about the Schnee family in a way. But anyway, so we get a conversation with Ironwood. Basically, Mr. Schnee he's not pleased with what's going on. And frickin' poor Ironwood, he's getting the brunt of everything. Yeah, he was a hard ass, last volume, especially to Yang because of what happened. But honestly, he was just a good guy trying to do the right thing. Admittedly, he went about it in a weird way, but still. So after the argument, we find out that Atlas is keeping an embargo on Dust, and because of this, what's it called? Basically, they're doing it to make sure Dust doesn't get shipped in any other kingdom, limiting their supply, and thus they can't wage war on Atlas because, Atlas mechs are attacking people, blah, blah, blah. Atlas is, bad, you know what I mean? And, with that, we find out, that, all eyes are kind of on Atlas on seeing what they want, what they're going to do. But, obviously, obviously with Atlas, in the range of, fire from all nations, they had to do something, so the embargo does make sense. But anyway, Ironwood, he begins to walk out and sees Weiss, and he briefly exchanges, a conversation with her, how he would definitely welcome her to study at Atlas Academy once it's back in session, and, I kind of like Ironwood in that regard of what he did there because he's giving Weiss an out. Sure, Weiss probably doesn't want to, that she went to Beacon for a reason, but obviously if she goes to Atlas, she'd be, it would be, a way of getting her, out of her father's reach for a bit. And, obviously Ironwood knows that when Mr. Schnee gets angry, he gets angry, so I think he understands that, hey, I'll offer this girl an out because she's alright, you know what I mean? So, we find out, after the talk, basically Mr. Schnee is convincing Weiss to sing at a charity event that they want to do. He mentions how he feels it'll make a lot of people happy since Weiss was directly fighting at Beacon during its fall. But really, it's just so that he can elevate the Schnee family image among all the Dread, and hopefully try and get the embargo lifted since he wants more profit. And, I kind of understand where he's coming from, all eyes are on Atlas, so make this a nice event to show that, hey, the Schnee, who is part of the Schnee Dust Company, which is part, a major factor in Atlas, was, directly in the attack, and, was fighting and stuff. And so he, kind of lift Atlas's name and show that, hey, listen, she's just as much a victim as everyone else. The robots were attacking her as well, so it's not Atlas who was, attacking this. So, I can understand what he's trying to do, but obviously his intentions aren't as pure-hearted as I'm making them out to be. He really just wants this for profit, most likely. So Weiss begrudgingly agrees and leaves, but isn't completely down in the dumps because we see, in the last part of her segment, we see that she's being entertained by her butler, Klein. Klein's an interesting fellow, and I'm only talking to him, not talking to him, but talking about him because he has a personality change depending on eye color. I'm curious as to see if that's going to be explained and what's with that because, listen, I wasn't curious in the butler, but, you made me curious now. So, that was RWBY Volume 4, Episode 2. Slow episode, no fight actually in this episode. Honestly, this was just set up for Weiss because most likely Weiss's story in this volume is going to be the charity concert, and something tells me that some bad stuff is going to happen at the charity concert. At least that's the way it's set up to me. Team Ranger, I'm curious as to what they're going to do without an airship. I guess they're going to try and find another town with an airship. So, yeah. I'm curious as to see what Ren and Nora are going to do since they seem to have a stake in what, the bandits that, did that to Shion. So, there's that. But yeah, interesting episode. Slow-paced episode, but to be honest, you need the slower character building moments because essentially this is a character building / training season. Obviously, you need those moments. Otherwise, if you pack it full of fights, it's not gonna work out too well. So, Ex-Aid, Kamen Rider Ex-Aid, episode 5. So, we get a scene in the beginning that Parrot mentions to Graphite that level 3 is upon them now that they have 5 players. And, that's coming straight to the chase, isn't it? Because, yeah, they're getting their upgrades like 5 episodes in, and I'm really surprised at this. So, the 4 Gashots that Dan said he'd complete were actually stolen by a Gashot thief. Like, they're finished, but they were stolen. Emu comes across the thief and calls for help, but he doesn't know he's the thief. And just as he's about to help him, Asuna and Hiro stop him, claiming he is the thief. The thief obviously runs while they're arguing, and they run into a bugster that's from Gekitotsu Robots. I believe his name is the Robo-Bugster. Interesting thing, though, the Gashot is sticking straight out of his head, like the Gekitotsu Robots Gashot. Sticking out of his head, which makes you kind of wonder what exactly it is. So, the two don't fare terribly well against it. Hiro and Emu, the rocket punches that the monster does is like, it's hard to counter. And then Genmu shows up and arrives to kick their ass. However, Kiria says he saw Genmu transform and knows who he is, saying that he's a Gashot thief. Meaning, everyone's thinking now, well, how did the Robo-Bugster happen? And it's interesting that they're doing artificial bugsters now, because, the Robo-Bugster, it's gonna show that it's not actually someone or, like, an actual, like, AI bugster in it. It's just, like, some kind of, how would you say, very robotic, only attacks when provoked and stuff like that. I'm not sure what to really say. It runs on autopilot, I guess. So, we have a bit of squabbling at the CR. Hiro saying as to why he's trying to figure out, so why is the life of a thief worth saving? And he doesn't get Emu's idealism. And, Emu's all like, if someone's sick, they have to treat them. And I understand the point of, Emu saying this, doctors and stuff. But I get Hiro's point, too, because this is also a guy with a bugster sickness who also knowingly stole 4 Gashots that are essentially made on, combating the bugster and Gem, who has level 3 already. And here's the thing, these 4 Gashots were probably, big in, a vault or something. You just don't, steal those easily. Even Dan talks to Emu and says that he can't let his connection to the patients get the better of him, because he can't afford to let the bad patients take advantage of his caring nature. So Mr. Robo-Bugster is attacking again, and we get a triple henshin with Laser, Brave, and Snipe. Kiria, however, says he has bigger fish to fry and begins to fight Genmu level 3, who just walked on the scene. Hiro and Taiga go level 2 and start to fight the Robo-Bugster, but his rocket punches are too strong. And then add in Genmu level 3, who just starts utterly wrecking people after Kiria taunts him, saying he knows who he is. But guess what? Genmu wasn't the Gashot thief, as the thief shows up, using the Gashikon bug visor to transform into Graphite. And, while Graphite is on the field, everyone is screwed because Kiria and Hiro were both forced to exit their transformations. And Taiga is the only one left, and he doesn't even fare remotely close to well with Graphite. And he's forced to back out as well. Genmu then, he taunts Emu saying, oh, your ideals as a doctor, they hold no place here. And we then see a major shift in Emu's personality swap. He gets really angry and cocky. And sure, it was a subtle confidence boost before, but they really emphasize that, yeah, Emu kind of snapped right there. So, Emu goes level 2, he completely wrecks the Robo-Bugster and Gekitotsu Robots, transforming into Ex-Aid Robot Gamer level 3 in order to wreck Gem with his giant fist and new armor upgrade. And what I love about Geki Totsu Robots, and it's probably my favorite finisher so far, he completely destroys Genmu because his finishing move is a rocket punch. He launches the big hand gauntlet at Genmu. It rams into him, slams him into pins him into a wall. And then that doesn't stop there. Enmu runs and reinserts his hand into the gauntlet and pushes it in just for that last push of an explosion. And that was really cool. Geki Totsu Robots is definitely a favorite for me. And next episode, we'll be getting, what's called Brave's robot, not robot, I believe Beat Quest Gamer or something, something like that. We'll be getting the rhythm form for Brave in the next episode. But, not talking about the next episode, we still have stuff. So, Genmu escapes and is revealed to be Dan, who was on the last sliver of his health. So, it explains everything now, because Kiria basically saw Dan transform. And Kiria's all hey, listen, I know who you are. And the thief wouldn't have reacted like the way Genmu did, who just completely and utterly wrecked Kiria. And, of course, Dan, was hell-bent on keeping his little identity secret. Though it looks like he fully reveals that he's evil next episode. But yeah, I thought it makes things interesting with Dan being Genmu because it explains the name now. And I thought it was going to be Parad because, he's with Graphite. Graphite has the bug visor and stuff like that. But hey, this still works, and it gives Dan presence in the story because he only had a little bit of it, and the only time he did have a big presence was in the virtual Rider series that they do on YouTube. So there is this YouTube series of videos that show off the Rider's transformations and finishers before transitioning into a Gamba Ride machine ad where the Rider plays as their Rider in Gamba Rising, and funny reactions and stuff. We get to see a lot of Dan in those, but the latest one with lasers is the creepiest because it shows the aftermath of what happened to Kiria. He's currently resting in the hospital. So because, Dan is sick and tired of Kiria trying to weasel his way in through any form of anything, he decides to show him the pecking order. So, while he's asleep and unconscious, he forces him into a virtual reality training session. Kiria decides to go full force to, but after going after going level 1, he can't because since Dan controls the session, Dan controls whoever is transformed in there. So Dan shows his full power over the virtual world. And Dan then forces Kiria into level 2, and you think he would ride him or something, right? Because he gets on, but nope, he sticks the Bakuso Bike shot into the finisher slot and gets off. He activates the finisher and just lets Kiria just ram into a wall at full speed. And it's really got the sense of, yeah, okay, you know who I am, but let me show you that I'm not just some idiot. This is how things are going to be, you got that? And, it gave off a really creepy vibe where Dan's all he's just all this is the pecking order. You do not go beyond this pecking order. Bye. Also I just found it hilarious how if you get Kiria into level 2, you can just activate the finisher to make him frickin' ram into a wall. That is hilarious. Now, why am I talking about the virtual operations episode? Because I thought it was pretty cool, creepy, and hilarious. But also because next week Superhero Time is preempted, meaning no Zyoju for, the Sentai fans, and no Kamen Rider Ex-Aid, meaning definitely a shorter and faster episode next week, hopefully. But don't worry, it's not just all going to be RWBY Volume 4. We got a new Intruder 3 trailer, and Intruder 3 debuts this coming Saturday. So, obviously, I'll be getting on to a faster video next week, because I'll be talking about the Intruder 3 and RWBY Volume 4. So, yeah, new trailer is pretty cool. Tom gets a new gun, which is actually a rifle, so hopefully, he can deal with this intruder, and hopefully this intruder isn't the same intruder, you know what I mean? But yeah, we'll just have to see and wait and just see what's going on. So anyway, I'm Zero. Episode 5 of Kamen Rider Ex-Aid was pretty cool. Nice debut for Geki Totsu robots. Also, the Genmu laser showdown in the Virtual Operations episode was creepy and funny. That was great. I wasn't expecting that. But yeah. So, I'll be seeing you guys next time for next episode, which will surprisingly not have any Kamen Rider in it because of reasons. So yeah, I'll be seeing you guys next time.